The rusty sunset glowed like hellfire on the horizon when Penelope Dawson stepped off the westbound train at Weaverville, Arizona territory in the summer of 1878. She clutched her worn leather valise, scanning the dusty depot with wary eyes. Her uncle's letter had promised a new life away from Boston's suffocating society. But the three weathered men leaning against the station wall, leering at her with undisguised interest, made her wonder if she'd made a terrible mistake. Penelope smoothed down her traveling dress, suddenly aware of how its eastern cut and quality fabric marked her as an outsider. The station master, a balding man with tobacco-stained teeth, shoved a slip of paper toward her. "Miss Dawson, your uncle sent word. He's been delayed at his claim. Won't be here till tomorrow." He gestured vaguely toward the town's main street. "Weaverville Hotel's just yonder. Decent enough place for a lady." Penelope's heart sank. Uncle Thomas had promised to meet her, to escort her to his modest ranch outside town, where she'd help keep house in exchange for a fresh start. The journey had been long, and the prospect of navigating an unfamiliar frontier town alone left her stomach knotted with anxiety. "Thank you," she managed, gathering her courage along with her skirts as she stepped onto the platform. She hadn't made it 3 paces before the trio of men straightened, blocking her path. The tallest one, sporting a filthy beard and smelling of whiskey, tipped his hat in mock politeness. "Well now, ain't you a pretty little thing? Reckon you need some help finding your way?" "No, thank you. I'm quite capable," Penelope replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Hear that, boys? She's quite capable," he mimicked, earning guffaws from his companions. "Fancy talk for a fancy lady. Maybe you'd like to have a drink with me and my friends. Get to know the local gentleman." Penelope clutched her valise tighter, eyes searching desperately for anyone who might intervene. The station master had disappeared, and the few other passengers from the train had already dispersed. She took a step backward. "I'm expected at the hotel. Please excuse me." The man's hand shot out, gripping her arm. "Now, don't be unfriendly. We're just being neighborly." The lady said no. The voice came from behind Penelope, deep, measured, with a hint of steel beneath its calm surface. The grip on her arm loosened as the 3 men's attention shifted. Penelope turned to see a tall figure silhouetted against the setting sun. He stepped forward, and the first thing she noticed was his broad shoulders beneath a worn leather vest. Then the weathered Stetson pulled low over his eyes. And finally, as he moved closer, the distinctive uneven gait, his left leg moving with a wooden thunk against the platform boards. "This ain't your concern, Kincaid," the bearded man spat. But Penelope didn't miss how he and his companions had stiffened, their former bravado fading. "When you're harassing a newcomer to my town, it becomes my concern." The newcomer's voice remained even, but his hand rested casually near the holstered Colt at his hip. "Miss, I'd be happy to escort you to the hotel." The 3 men exchanged glances, weighing their options. Finally, the leader shrugged. "Ain't worth the trouble. Come on, boys." They shuffled away, casting dark looks over their shoulders. Penelope released a shaky breath. "Thank you, Mr. Kincaid, Lucas Kincaid." He tipped his hat, revealing a face younger than she'd expected, perhaps 30, with keen blue eyes and a strong jaw softened by the hint of a smile. "And you'd be?" "Penelope Dawson. I've come to stay with my uncle, Thomas Dawson." Recognition flashed across his face. "Old Tom's niece from back east? He's mentioned you'd be arriving." He extended his arm. "If you'll allow me, Miss Dawson, I'd consider it an honor to see you safely to the hotel." Penelope hesitated only briefly before accepting his arm. As they moved down the platform, she couldn't help but notice how he compensated for his wooden leg with a smooth, practiced motion. Despite his disability, there was nothing weak about Lucas Kincaid. He carried himself with quiet confidence, and the townspeople they passed nodded respectfully or called greetings. "You know my uncle well?" she asked as they made their way down the dusty main street. "Everyone knows everyone in Weaverville," Lucas replied. "Your uncle's a good man, hard-working, honest. We've done business a time or 2. "What sort of business are you in, Mr. Kincaid?" "I own the livery stable. Do some ranching on the side." He glanced at her with a hint of amusement. "Not quite what you're used to back east, I imagine." "Boston has its charms," Penelope replied carefully. "But I've come west for a change." "Most folks do," he said, leaving the obvious question what she was running from unasked. They reached the hotel, a two-story wooden structure that was surprisingly well maintained. Lucas escorted her inside, speaking briefly to the proprietress, a stout woman named Mrs. Finch, who clucked sympathetically at Penelope's situation. "Don't you worry, dearie. We'll get you settled proper. And Mr. Kincaid here is a gentleman through and through," Mrs. Finch assured her, shooting Lucas an approving look. "Unlike some of the riffraff hanging around the depot these days." "Thank you both for your kindness," Penelope said, suddenly exhausted from the journey and the encounter. Lucas tipped his hat again. "I've got business with your uncle tomorrow. If you'd like, I could escort you to his place when he arrives." Penelope found herself nodding, relieved at the prospect of a friendly face. "I would appreciate that very much, Mr. Kincaid." After he departed, Mrs. Finch showed Penelope to a small but clean room. "That man's the salt of the earth," she confided as she turned down the bed. "Fought in the war, lost his leg at Shiloh. Came west afterward, built himself a good business. No man more respected in these parts." Penelope unpacked her few belongings, mulling over the day's events. Lucas Kincaid intrigued her, not just his timely rescue or his obvious standing in the community, but something in his eyes, a depth of character perhaps, or a hint of past pain carefully guarded. She found herself unexpectedly looking forward to seeing him again tomorrow. As she prepared for bed, Penelope reflected that her first day in the Arizona Territory had been more eventful than she'd anticipated. She'd come west seeking refuge from scandal and heartbreak, hoping for anonymity in this distant frontier. Instead, she'd immediately caught the attention of both the worst and possibly the best that Weaverville had to offer. Morning arrived with blinding sunshine and the sounds of a town already bustling with activity. Penelope dressed carefully in one of her plainer dresses, trying to strike a balance between propriety and practicality in this new environment. Mrs. Finch provided a hearty breakfast and cheerful conversation, filling her in on the essential details of Weaverville's society. "Town's grown considerably since the Silver Strike 3 years back," the older woman explained. "Got nearly 800 souls now, and even a proper church, though we still have our share of troublemakers passing through." "Like the men at the station yesterday?" Penelope asked. Mrs. Finch nodded grimly. "The Rudder brothers and their friend Pike. They work for Harrison Blackwell, owns the biggest mine hereabouts. His men think they can do as they please." She leaned forward conspiratorially. "Your Mr. Kincaid's one of the few who stands up to them." "He's hardly my Mr. Kincaid," Penelope protested, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. "Of course, dearie," Mrs. Finch replied with a knowing smile, "though many a local girl has set her cap for him. Wooden leg or no, he's considered quite a catch." Before Penelope could respond, the hotel door opened and Lucas Kincaid himself entered, removing his hat as he crossed the threshold. The morning light caught the golden highlights in his brown hair, and Penelope noticed for the first time a thin scar that ran along his jawline. "Morning, ladies," he greeted them. "Miss Dawson, I've just come from the telegraph office. Your uncle sent word that he's been further delayed. Seems his wagon broke an axle about 15 miles out." Penelope's face fell. "Oh dear. When does he expect to arrive?" "Not for another 2 days, I'm afraid." Lucas hesitated, then continued. "Mrs. Finch runs a fine establishment, but staying in town alone might not be comfortable for you, given yesterday's incident." "Are you suggesting an alternative, Mr. Kincaid?" Penelope asked, raising an eyebrow. "My ranch is about 3 miles outside town. My housekeeper, Mrs. Abernathy, is a respectable widow. I'd be happy to offer you accommodation there until your uncle arrives." Mrs. Finch interjected before Penelope could reply. "That's a fine idea. Sarah Abernathy is beyond reproach, and it would be safer than staying in town." Penelope weighed her options. Remaining alone in town, potentially attracting more unwanted attention from men like the Rudders, seemed unwise. And while she barely knew Lucas Kincaid, his reputation appeared solid, and Mrs. Finch clearly trusted him. "Very well," she decided. "If it's truly no imposition, I accept your offer, Mr. Kincaid." "No imposition at all," he assured her, with a slight smile that transformed his serious face. "I'll ready the buggy while you gather your things." Half an hour later, they were traveling along a dusty road, leaving Weaverville behind. Lucas handled the horses with confident expertise, his strong hands sure on the reins. The wooden leg, Penelope noticed, seemed to trouble him little as he drove. "May I ask about your injury?" she ventured, then immediately regretted her boldness. "Forgive me, that's terribly forward." "No need for apologies," Lucas replied easily. "Happened at Shiloh, 62. I was 19, thought I was invincible." His expression darkened momentarily. "Found out otherwise when a cannonball took half my leg. Spent 6 months in a field hospital before they sent me home." "That must have been terrible." "It was." He was quiet for a moment. "But a man can either let such things destroy him or build from them. I chose to build." He glanced at her. "What about you, Miss Dawson? What brings a Boston lady to the Arizona territory?" Penelope tensed. "As I said, a desire for change." "Most folks running from something don't just seek change," Lucas observed mildly. "They seek escape." "Are you suggesting I'm running from something, Mr. Kincaid? Aren't we all in some fashion?" The directness of his gaze made Penelope look away. She hadn't expected such perception from a frontier liveryman. "My situation in Boston became untenable," she finally admitted. "I was engaged to be married. The gentleman in question proved less than honorable." "He hurt you," Lucas stated simply, no question in his voice. "Not physically," Penelope clarified, "but I discovered he was only interested in my family's name and connections. When my father's business failed, he quickly transferred his attentions to an heiress." "Leaving you with a damaged reputation through no fault of your own," Lucas concluded. "Society can be unforgiving, even when one is merely the victim of another's deceit." She smoothed her skirts. "My uncle's invitation arrived at precisely the right moment." Lucas nodded thoughtfully. "The West has its own code, Miss Dawson. Less refined, perhaps, than Boston society, but in many ways more honest. Out here, a person is judged by their actions and character, not their circumstances." "Is that true for everyone?" "Not always," he conceded, "but more often than you might think." The conversation lapsed into comfortable silence as they crested a small rise. Below them spread a modest but well-maintained ranch, a sturdy log house, a large barn, corrals containing several horses, and cattle grazing in the distance. "Welcome to the Circle K," Lucas said, a note of pride in his voice. "It's lovely," Penelope remarked, genuinely impressed by the neat, prosperous appearance of the property. As they approached, a gray-haired woman emerged from the house, shading her eyes against the sun. Lucas helped Penelope down from the buggy, making the introduction. "Mrs. Abernathy, this is Miss Penelope Dawson, Tom Dawson's niece. She'll be staying with us until her uncle arrives." Mrs. Abernathy smiled warmly. "Welcome, Miss Dawson. I've prepared the guest room for you." "Thank you for accommodating me on such short notice," Penelope said. "Nonsense. It's a pleasure to have another woman around. This one," she jerked a thumb toward Lucas, "isn't much for conversation most days." Lucas laughed, a rich, unexpected sound. "I'll see to the horses while you ladies get acquainted." As he led the team toward the barn, Penelope couldn't help but watch him go, noting again the distinctive gait that somehow didn't diminish his natural dignity and strength. "He's a good man," Mrs. Abernathy said quietly, following Penelope's gaze. "The best I know." Penelope blushed, realizing she'd been caught staring. "He's been very kind." "Kindness runs deep in Lucas Kincaid," the older woman affirmed. "Come along now, let's get you settled." The next 2 days passed in a peaceful rhythm, unlike anything Penelope had known in Boston. She helped Mrs. Abernathy with household tasks, learned about the operation of the ranch, and even tried her hand at riding one of Lucas's gentler mares, an activity considered scandalously unfeminine in Boston society. Lucas himself proved to be an attentive but unobtrusive host. He spent much of the daylight hours working with his ranch hands or attending to business in town, but joined Penelope and Mrs. Abernathy for evening meals. During these times, Penelope discovered that beneath his quiet exterior lay a sharp intelligence and unexpected knowledge of literature and world affairs. "You've read Dickens?" she asked in surprise when he referenced David Copperfield during a conversation. "I had a lot of time for reading during my recovery," he explained, "and later, winter evenings on a ranch can be long. Books are good company." On the morning of the third day, as they finished breakfast, the sound of an approaching wagon drew them outside. Penelope recognized her uncle immediately, a stout, white-bearded man with kind eyes that lit up at the sight of her. "Penny!" he called, using her childhood nickname as he clambered down from the wagon seat. "By God, look at you, the spitting image of your mother." Penelope embraced him warmly. "Uncle Thomas, it's wonderful to see you." "Apologies for the delay," he said, turning to shake Lucas's hand. "That blasted axle caused no end of trouble. I appreciate you looking after my niece, Kincaid." "It was my pleasure," Lucas replied, his eyes briefly meeting Penelope's. "Miss Dawson has been a delightful guest." Thomas helped Penelope load her valise onto his wagon, then turned to Lucas again. "Almost got word about those horses you were asking after. Fellow in Prescott has a pair of Morgan geldings that might suit your needs." "Good news," Lucas nodded. "I'll ride out there next week." "You should come for dinner before you go," Thomas suggested. "Sunday, I know Penny would appreciate the company while she settles in." He glanced mischievously at his niece. "Not much society out at my place, I'm afraid." Penelope felt her cheeks warm. "Uncle, please don't presume." "I'd be honored," Lucas cut in smoothly. "Sunday it is?" As they prepared to depart, Lucas helped Penelope onto the wagon seat. Their hands touched briefly, and she felt an unexpected flutter in her chest at the contact. "Until Sunday, Miss Dawson," he said quietly. "Until then, Mr. Kincaid, and thank you again for your hospitality." As the wagon pulled away, Penelope found herself looking back more than once at the diminishing figure of Lucas Kincaid, standing tall and steady despite his wooden leg, watching them go. Uncle Thomas's ranch proved to be smaller than the Circle K, but comfortable enough a two-room cabin with a lean-to kitchen, a modest barn, and a small herd of cattle. It sat in a pretty valley with a creek running behind the house. "It's not what you're used to," Thomas apologized as he showed her to the small bedroom he'd prepared for her arrival. "It's perfect," Penelope assured him. After the pretensions and betrayals of Boston society, the honest simplicity of her uncle's home felt refreshing. Over the next few days, Penelope settled into ranch life. She learned to cook on a wood stove, helped tend the kitchen garden, and even assisted with minor ranch tasks. Her uncle, a widower of 15 years, was clearly delighted to have her presence brightening his solitary existence. Sunday arrived with Penelope experiencing an anticipation that surprised her. She spent extra time arranging her hair and chose her green dress the one that best complemented her eyes. Uncle Thomas noticed her efforts with a knowing smile, but was kind enough not to comment. Lucas arrived precisely at noon, riding a magnificent black stallion. He'd dressed for the occasion as well. Penelope noted his usual working clothes, replaced by a clean white shirt, dark vest, and polished boots. He'd even trimmed his beard. The wooden leg remained, of course, but Penelope found she hardly noticed it anymore. Dinner was a pleasant affair, with Thomas regaling them with stories of his younger days as a trapper, an explorer of the territory. Lucas contributed tales of the cattle drives he'd participated in before establishing his ranch, and Penelope found herself laughing more than she had in months. After the meal, Thomas conspicuously announced he needed to check on a sick calf, leaving Penelope and Lucas alone on the small front porch. They sat in rocking chairs, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of gold and purple. "It's beautiful here," Penelope murmured. "So different from Boston. Do you miss it? The city life?" She considered the question carefully. "I miss certain aspects, the libraries, the concerts, the museums. But the people," she shook her head. "I've found more genuine kindness here in a week than in years of Boston society." "The territory has its share of ruffians, too," Lucas reminded her. "Men like the Rudders." "Yes, but also men like you," she replied, then blushed at her own boldness. Lucas regarded her with those thoughtful blue eyes. "You give me too much credit, Miss Dawson." "I don't think so." Penelope gathered her courage. "Mrs. Abernathy told me something of your history, how you came west with nothing after the war. Built your business from the ground up." "Mrs. Abernathy talks too much," he said, but there was no real reproach in his tone. "She admires you greatly, as do many in Weaverville, from what I've observed." Lucas looked away, uncomfortable with the praise. "I've just tried to live honestly, make something worthwhile." That's more than many manage, Penelope said softly. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the rhythmic creaking of the rocking chairs and the distant lowing of cattle. Penelope felt a peculiar contentment in Lucas's company, a sense of safety and understanding that she hadn't expected to find in this rugged land. "Will you be staying long?" Lucas finally asked. "With your uncle?" "I haven't decided," Penelope admitted. "I came without a definite plan, only knowing I needed to leave Boston. And now?" She met his gaze. "Now I'm beginning to think the territory might suit me better than I anticipated." Something flickered in Lucas's eyes. Hope, perhaps, or a reflection of her own growing feelings. Before he could respond, however, the sound of approaching horses shattered the peaceful moment. 3 riders appeared on the trail leading to the ranch, and even in the fading light, Penelope recognized the Rudder brothers and their companion Pike. Thomas emerged from the barn, frowning at the unexpected visitors. Lucas rose smoothly to his feet, his hand instinctively moving toward his gun. "Stay on the porch," he told Penelope quietly before stepping down to stand beside Thomas. The riders pulled up in the yard, their horses blowing hard as if they'd been ridden fast. "Evening, Dawson," the eldest Rudder called. "Kincaid." He nodded coldly. "Fancy finding you here?" "What brings you boys out this way?" Thomas asked, his tone carefully neutral, though Penelope could see the tension in his stance. "Message from Mr. Blackwell," Pike announced. "He's making you an offer for your land, $500. Thomas snorted. "This land's worth 10 times that, and Blackwell knows it." "He figured you might say that." Rudder's gaze shifted meaningfully to the cabin, where Penelope stood watching. "Said to remind you that it's dangerous country for a man living alone, more so for one with a pretty niece to protect." Lucas stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. "That sounds remarkably like a threat, Rudder." "Just delivering a business proposition," the man replied with a nasty smile. "Mr. Blackwell's a reasonable man. He likes to settle things peacefully when he can." "Tell Blackwell my land isn't for sale," Thomas said firmly. "Not at any price." Pike spat on the ground. "You'll regret that decision, old man." "And you'll regret making threats on this property," Lucas countered, his hand now resting openly on his holstered pistol. "Ride out, now." The 3 men exchanged glances, clearly weighing their options. Though they outnumbered Lucas and Thomas, something in Lucas's steady gaze made them hesitate. "We'll be seeing you again," Rudder promised as they wheeled their horses around. "Both of you." As they galloped away, Penelope hurried down from the porch. "Who is this Blackwell? Why does he want Uncle Thomas's land?" Thomas sighed heavily. "Harrison Blackwell. Owns the Silver Queen mine and most of Weaverville by now. Been buying up ranches all through the valley. There are rumors he's found a new silver vein," Lucas added, "running right through this part of the valley. And my land sits on top of it," Thomas concluded grimly. "He's been trying to buy me out for months, but I've refused. This is the first time he's resorted to open threats." Penelope looked between the 2 men, alarmed. "What will you do?" "Stand my ground," her uncle said firmly. "This land's all I have. I won't be bullied off it." Lucas nodded approvingly, but Penelope didn't miss the concern in his eyes. "I should get back to my ranch, but I'll spread word about what happened. Blackwell has influence, but he doesn't own everyone in the territory." As Lucas prepared to leave, Penelope walked with him to where his horse waited. "I'm worried," she admitted quietly. "With good reason," Lucas said, his voice equally low. "Blackwell's dangerous. Men have stood against him before and met with accidents." Fear clutched at Penelope's heart. "Then Uncle Thomas should sell. No land is worth his life." "It's not about the land," Lucas explained gently. "It's about standing up to men who think their money gives them the right to take whatever they want. If everyone yielded to Blackwell's tactics, what kind of community would we have? But what can we do against someone so powerful?" Lucas took her hand in his touch warm and reassuring. "We stand together. There are more good people in this territory than bad ones. Blackwell will discover that if he pushes too far." The simple contact of his hand around hers sent a flutter through Penelope's chest. Despite the worry of the moment, she found herself drawn to his quiet strength, his unwavering principles. "I'll come by tomorrow to check on you both," Lucas promised, reluctantly releasing her hand. "Lock your doors tonight." After he departed, Penelope and her uncle secured the cabin as best they could. Thomas took down his old army rifle from above the fireplace, checking it was loaded before placing it near his bed. "Don't you fret, Penny," he assured her. "This isn't the first time I've had to stand my ground out here, and Blackwell knows I'm no easy target. With Kincaid on our side, we'll be fine." Penelope wasn't so certain, but she kept her fears to herself as she retired to her small bedroom. Sleep came fitfully, her dreams haunted by the threatening faces of the Rudder brothers and the protective blue eyes of Lucas Kincaid. True to his word, Lucas returned the following day. He brought with him 2 of his ranch hands, brothers named Miguel and Joaquin Vasquez, who he introduced as the best trackers and shooters in the territory. "They'll stay here for a few days," Lucas explained to Thomas and Penelope. "Just as a precaution." "You think Blackwell will try something so soon?" Thomas asked. "I think it's better to be prepared," Lucas replied. "I've also spoken with Sheriff Miller in town. He can't do much without actual proof of wrongdoing, but he's aware of the situation." The Vasquez brothers set up camp near the barn, their presence providing Penelope with a measure of reassurance. Lucas stayed through the afternoon, helping Thomas repair a section of fencing that had been mysteriously broken overnight, possibly by Blackwell's men, though they couldn't be certain. As they worked, Penelope brought them water and observed Lucas closely. Despite his wooden leg, he worked tirelessly, his strong hands expertly wielding tools, his body moving with a fluid grace that belied his disability. More than once, she caught him watching her too, his gaze quickly shifting away when their eyes met. The days that followed established a new pattern. Lucas visited daily, often bringing supplies or news from town. The Vasquez brothers remained vigilant, patrolling the property boundaries. Thomas went about his ranch work, rifle always close at hand. A week passed without further incident, then another. Penelope began to hope that Blackwell had reconsidered his tactics or found easier targets for his expansion. One evening, as summer heat gave way to the cooler air of approaching autumn, Lucas arrived for dinner, now a regular occurrence that Penelope looked forward to with increasing anticipation. This time, he brought an unexpected gift, a small bookshelf filled with volumes from his own collection. "I remembered you mentioned missing Boston's libraries," he explained almost shyly as Thomas helped him carry it into the cabin. "Thought these might help?" Penelope ran her fingers reverently over the leather-bound spines, Shakespeare, Austen, Dickens, and more. "This is incredibly thoughtful," she said, deeply touched by the gesture. "But I couldn't possibly accept such valuable items." "They're on loan," Lucas clarified with a small smile, "just until you establish your own library." The implication that he expected hoped she would remain in the territory permanently wasn't lost on Penelope. Nor was it unwelcome. After dinner, while Thomas dozed in his chair, Lucas and Penelope sat together on the porch swing, closer than propriety might strictly allow. The night air was cool enough that Penelope had draped a shawl around her shoulders, and Lucas sat near enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "Tell me about your life before the war," she prompted. "You know so much about my past, yet I know little of yours." Lucas gazed out into the darkness. "Not much to tell. Grew up in Kentucky. Father was a horse breeder. I learned the trade from him, expected to take over the family business someday." He paused. "Then the war came. Father and I both enlisted, though on different regiments. He didn't come home." "I'm so sorry," Penelope said softly. "Mother passed while I was recovering from my injury. By the time I was well enough to return home, the farm had been sold for taxes." His voice held old pain, but no bitterness. "So I came west, started over. That must have taken incredible courage." Lucas shrugged. "What choice did I have? Lie down and die? That's never been my way." "Is that why you stand against men like Blackwell? Because giving in isn't your way?" "Partly," he admitted, "but mostly because I've seen what happens when good people stay silent in the face of injustice. Nothing good ever comes of it." Penelope found herself drawing closer to him, drawn by his quiet conviction. "You're a remarkable man, Lucas Kincaid." In the silver moonlight, she saw color rise to his cheeks at her compliment. "Hardly remarkable, just stubborn, according to most." "Stubborn can be a virtue," she smiled. Their eyes held for a long moment, the air between them charged with unspoken feelings. Lucas leaned slightly forward, and Penelope's heart quickened as she realized he meant to kiss her. She found herself leaning toward him in return, anticipation fluttering in her chest. The crack of a rifle shot shattered the night. Lucas reacted instantly, pulling Penelope down as a second shot splintered the wooden post beside them. Inside, Thomas awakened with a shout, grabbing his rifle. "Stay down!" Lucas ordered, drawing his pistol as he pulled Penelope toward the door. The Vasquez brothers emerged from the bunkhouse, rifles ready, calling out in Spanish to each other as they sought the source of the shots. Once inside, Lucas positioned himself at a window, peering cautiously into the darkness. "Can't see them. Must be shooting from the tree line." Thomas joined him, rifle at the ready. "Cowards, shooting from hiding instead of facing us straight on." Another shot rang out, this one striking the barn. In the distance, they heard horses whinnying in fear. "They're trying to stampede the horses," Lucas realized. "Miguel! Joaquin!" he called through the window. "Check the corral," the brothers acknowledged, moving cautiously toward the barn area. More shots followed, but none came close to the brothers, suggesting the attackers were more interested in terrorizing than killing. For nearly an hour, intermittent shots kept them pinned down in the cabin. Finally, they heard the sound of galloping horses heading away from the property. "They're gone," Miguel reported, approaching the cabin cautiously. "But they cut your fence, Senor Dawson. Most of your horses have scattered." Thomas cursed under his breath. "That'll take days to round them up." "That's the point," Lucas said grimly. "It's not a coincidence. Blackwell's escalating, trying to make running this ranch so difficult that you'll give up." Penelope, who had remained remarkably calm during the attack, now felt a surge of anger. "This is outrageous! Surely the law can do something now." "We have no proof it was Blackwell's men," Thomas pointed out wearily. "But we know," Penelope insisted, "and I won't stand for it. There must be a way to fight back." Lucas regarded her with a mixture of admiration and concern. "There is, but it's dangerous. Blackwell has judges and politicians in his pocket. Going against him means risking everything." "Some things are worth the risk," she replied firmly, echoing his own philosophy back to him. The corner of Lucas's mouth quirked up in the beginning of a smile. "Indeed they are." He turned to Thomas. "I'll help you track down your horses tomorrow, and I'll bring some of my men to help repair the fences." As the night wore on, Lucas insisted on staying to stand guard, sending the Vasquez brothers to rest while he took the first watch. Penelope brought him coffee as he sat by the window, his pistol resting on his knee. "You should try to sleep," he told her gently. "I doubt I could," she admitted, sitting beside him. "Not after all this." In the lamplight, his face looked careworn, but determined. "I'm sorry you've been drawn into this conflict, Penelope. It's not what you came west for." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and the intimacy of it warmed her despite the night's tensions. "Perhaps it's exactly what I needed," she countered. "In Boston, I was surrounded by people who claimed civility while practicing deceit. Here, at least, the battle lines are clearly drawn. Still, I hate to see you in danger. Better danger with purpose than safety without meaning," she said softly. Lucas's gaze intensified as he studied her face. "You're not at all what I expected when I first saw you at the train station. What did you expect? A fragile eastern flower that would wilt in our harsh climate," he admitted. "Instead, I found a woman with more backbone than most men I know." Penelope felt herself blush at the undisguised admiration in his voice. "The circumstances of my life have required me to develop strength I didn't know I possessed." "The circumstances reveal the strength. They don't create it," Lucas corrected gently. "It was always there within you." The conversation faded into comfortable silence as they kept vigil together through the night. Occasionally their eyes would meet, and Penelope felt the growing connection between them, a bond forged in adversity, but rooted in mutual respect and deepening affection. Morning arrived without further incident. True to his word, Lucas brought additional men from his ranch to help search for the scattered horses and repair the damaged fences. By sunset, most of the immediate problems had been addressed, though everyone remained on heightened alert. Over the following weeks, a pattern of harassment continued. Cattle were found with mysterious injuries. A water pump was sabotaged. Anonymous threats were delivered by terrified messenger boys paid handsomely for their services, but unable to identify their employer. Through it all, Lucas remained a steadfast ally, dividing his time between his own ranch and the Dawson property. His feelings for Penelope grew increasingly obvious to everyone, though frontier propriety and the ongoing crisis prevented him from formally declaring himself. Penelope, for her part, found herself falling deeply in love with the quiet, principled man who refused to be defined by his disability or deterred by powerful enemies. His intelligence, compassion, and unwavering courage spoke to something fundamental in her soul. The situation came to a head in late October, when Thomas traveled to Prescott for supplies, leaving Penelope under the protection of the Vasquez brothers. Lucas had promised to check in, but urgent business at his own ranch had delayed him. As twilight descended, Penelope heard an unusual commotion outside. Peering cautiously through the window, she saw 5 mounted men surrounding the Vasquez brothers, who stood with their hands raised. The Rudder brothers and Pike were easily recognizable among them. Fear clutched at her heart as she realized what was happening. Blackwell had waited for a moment when both Thomas and Lucas were away to make his move. The eldest Rudder dismounted and approached the cabin, calling out, "Miss Dawson, we know you're alone in there. Come on out nice and peaceful. Mr. Blackwell wants a word with you." Penelope's mind raced. The rifle was in her uncle's bedroom, but she'd never fired it. She had no way to summon help. The Vasquez brothers were neutralized. Taking a deep breath, she opened the door, but remained on the threshold. "Mr. Blackwell can call upon me properly in town if he wishes to speak with me," she replied, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. Rudder's face twisted in an ugly smile. "Afraid that won't do, miss. He's sent us to escort you to his office. Thinks you might help convince your uncle to be reasonable." "I'm not going anywhere with you," Penelope stated firmly. "Wasn't asking permission," Rudder growled, starting up the porch steps. Penelope retreated inside, slamming and bolting the door. She heard cursing, then the sound of boots on the porch boards as the men surrounded the cabin. "You've got 1 minute to come out, or we start shooting," Rudder shouted. "Starting with these Mexican boys." Panicked, Penelope ran to her uncle's room and grabbed the rifle. She'd watched Thomas clean and load it often enough to understand its basic operation, but her hands trembled as she checked that it was ready to fire. A crash from the front room told her they were attempting to break down the door. She positioned herself in the bedroom doorway, rifle raised awkwardly. The front door splintered open and Rudder burst in, pistol drawn. He froze at the sight of Penelope with the rifle. "Now, miss, don't do anything foolish," he said, his voice deceptively gentle. "You don't want to use that. A delicate lady like yourself could get hurt." "Stay back," Penelope warned, the rifle barrel wavering slightly in her inexperienced hands. Rudder took a step forward. "You won't shoot me. You don't have it in you." The rifle blast caught everyone by surprise, including Penelope. She hadn't consciously pulled the trigger, but the threat to her life had moved her finger of its own accord. The bullet went wide, splintering the doorframe near Rudder's head. He ducked, cursing violently, then lunged toward her. Penelope swung the rifle like a club, catching him on the shoulder, but failing to stop his advance. His hands closed around the weapon, wrenching it from her grasp. "You'll pay for that," he snarled, raising his hand to strike her. The sound of another gunshot froze him mid-motion. From the doorway came a cold, steady voice that Penelope recognized immediately. "Touch her, and the next bullet goes through your heart." Lucas stood in the shattered doorway, pistol aimed unerringly at Rudder's chest. Despite having obviously ridden hard to get there, his clothes were dusty, his face streaked with sweat, his hand was perfectly steady, his eyes hard as flint. "Kincaid," Rudder spat, "always interfering where you're not wanted." "Step away from Miss Dawson," Lucas ordered, ignoring the comment. "Now." For a tense moment, Rudder seemed to consider resistance. Then, slowly, he backed away from Penelope. "Where are your friends?" Lucas asked, not lowering his pistol. "Outside, watching your Mexican friends." "Not anymore," came another voice as Sheriff Miller appeared behind Lucas, shotgun in hand. "My deputies have them covered. This has gone far enough, Rudder." Relief washed over Penelope as she realized help had arrived in force. She moved quickly to Lucas's side, noting the fierce protectiveness in his stance even as he maintained his focus on the threat. Outside, they found the Vasquez brothers being untied by deputies while Rudder's companions sat disarmed under guard. "We caught them red-handed this time," Sheriff Miller told Lucas. "Attempted kidnapping, breaking and entering, assault that's enough to put them away for years, even without tying them directly to Blackwell." "Blackwell will have them out by morning," Lucas predicted grimly. "Maybe," the sheriff conceded. "But this time we have witnesses, and I've telegraphed the territorial marshal. He's been looking for reasons to investigate Blackwell for years." As the prisoners were led away, Penelope finally gave in to the delayed shock of the ordeal. Her knees buckled, and Lucas caught her, his strong arms supporting her weight easily despite his wooden leg. "I've got you," he murmured against her hair. "You're safe now." "How did you know to come?" she asked, clinging to the solid warmth of him. "One of my hands spotted Rudder and his men heading this way," Lucas explained. "I rode for the sheriff, then came straight here." His arms tightened around her. "I was terrified I'd be too late." "But you weren't," she whispered. "You saved me. Again." The realization that she could have been killed or worse hit Penelope fully then, and she began to tremble uncontrollably. Lucas led her to a chair, kneeling awkwardly before her, despite his wooden leg. "It's over now," he assured her, taking her cold hands in his warm ones. "And you were incredibly brave. Not many would have had the courage to stand against armed men as you did." "I was terrified," she admitted. "Courage isn't the absence of fear," Lucas said softly. "It's acting despite it." Impulsively, Penelope leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. Lucas froze for an instant in surprise, then responded with gentle pressure, his hand rising to cup her cheek with exquisite tenderness. When they parted, both slightly breathless, Lucas searched her face with wondering eyes. "Penelope," he began, then hesitated. "Yes?" she prompted, her heart pounding. "I know I'm not what a woman like you deserves," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "A crippled rancher with little to offer beyond a hard-working life. But these past weeks have shown me that I can't imagine my future without you in it." "Lucas," she interrupted, placing her fingers against his lips, "do you imagine I care about your leg? That I would judge a man's worth by whether he has one leg or two? It's your heart, your character, your unwavering courage that I've fallen in love with." His eyes widened at her frank declaration. "You love me?" "With all my heart," she confirmed, smiling through tears that had begun to fall. "Though it's terribly forward of me to say so before you've properly declared yourself." A slow, radiant smile transformed Lucas's face. "Penelope Dawson, I have loved you since the moment you faced down Blackwell's men, with nothing but your wits and determination. I will love you until my dying day, if you'll have me." "I will," she whispered, leaning forward to kiss him again. This time, the kiss deepened, conveying all the emotions they'd held in check through weeks of growing affection and shared danger. When Thomas returned the following day to find his niece and Lucas Kincaid sitting close together on the porch, their clasped hands telling their own story, he merely nodded with satisfaction. "About time," he declared. "Been watching you two dance around each other for months." The events at the Dawson Ranch became the catalyst for wider changes in the territory. True to Lucas's prediction, Blackwell initially managed to secure the release of Rudder and his men. But the territorial marshal arrived days later with a federal warrant, investigating allegations of claim jumping, bribery of officials, and intimidation throughout the region. As witnesses came forward, emboldened by Penelope's stand against the powerful mine owner, Blackwell's empire began to crumble. By Christmas, he had fled the territory, leaving his mines and properties to be claimed by creditors or returned to their rightful owners. Lucas and Penelope were married on New Year's Day, 1879, in Weaverville's small church. The entire community turned out for the celebration, honoring not just the union of two beloved community members, but also the triumph of justice over corruption. Thomas gave the bride away, beaming with pride. Mrs. Abernathy wept openly during the ceremony, later claiming she'd known from the first moment Lucas brought Penelope to the ranch that they were destined for each other. After the wedding, the couple moved into Lucas's ranch house, which had been expanded and improved in anticipation of their marriage. Penelope brought with her not just her personal belongings, but also a new piano, a wedding gift from her uncle that had been transported at great expense from Prescott. "Now you can have your music again," Lucas said, as he watched her lovingly unpack sheet music in their new parlor. "And you can have your books back," she teased, gesturing to the volumes he'd loaned her, now permanently installed on shelves built specifically for them. "I'd rather have you read to me," he smiled, pulling her into his arms. "Your voice makes even Dickens sound better." In the years that followed, the Circle K Ranch prospered under their joint management. Lucas's expertise with horses combined with Penelope's shrewd business sense, a skill she'd inherited from her father, made their operation one of the most successful in the territory. Their first child, a son they named Thomas Lucas Kincaid, arrived in the winter of 1880, followed 2 years later by twin daughters, Sarah and Elizabeth. The children grew up strong and free in the Arizona sunshine, riding almost before they could walk, treasuring the bedtime stories their mother read and the moral lessons their father taught through example more than words. Lucas's wooden leg remained a part of him, occasionally causing pain during weather changes or after particularly strenuous days. But Penelope never saw it as a deficiency, only as a badge of the courage and resilience that defined the man she loved. On their 10th wedding anniversary, as they sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard, Penelope leaned against Lucas's shoulder. "Do you ever think about how differently our lives might have turned out?" she asked. "If you hadn't been at the train station that day?" Lucas considered the question, his arm tightening around her shoulders. "I believe we would have found each other somehow," he said finally. "Some things are meant to be. Like a Boston society girl falling in love with a one-legged cowboy," she teased gently. "Exactly like that," he agreed, turning to kiss her with the same tenderness he'd shown on their first kiss. "Though I still wonder sometimes what you see in me." Penelope touched his face, her eyes reflecting the depth of her love. "I see the man who taught me that true strength has nothing to do with physical wholeness and everything to do with the integrity of one's character." She smiled. "And who continues to be the best man I've ever known." "Even with this?" he asked, tapping his wooden leg. "Especially with that," she assured him. "It reminds me daily of your courage, your perseverance, and how fortunate I am that you fought your way back from that battlefield to eventually find your way to me." As the sun set over the mountains they both now called home, Lucas and Penelope Kincaid sat in contented silence. Surrounded by the life they had built together, a life founded on mutual respect, unwavering love, and the shared understanding that true strength comes not from perfect circumstances, but from the will to overcome whatever obstacles life presents. For Penelope, the journey from Boston society to the Arizona territory had brought her not just geographical distance from her past disappointments, but the profound discovery that sometimes one must travel far from home to finally find where they truly belong. And for Lucas, the woman who had seen beyond his wooden leg to the strength within had given him not just a partner in life, but the abiding certainty that he was whole in all the ways that mattered most. Their love story, born in danger and nurtured through adversity, became part of local legend, a testament to the power of seeing beyond outward appearances to the character that defines a person's true worth. In later years, as Arizona progressed towards statehood and the frontier gradually gave way to civilization, Lucas and Penelope remained fixtures in their community. He serving on the territorial legislature, advocating for ranchers' rights and fair treatment of all citizens regardless of background. She establishing the region's first proper school and library, ensuring that future generations would have access to the education she had once feared leaving behind. Their children grew up understanding the value of both their father's frontier practicality and their mother's eastern refinement, combining the best of both worlds as they forged their own paths in a territory rapidly transforming into a state. And on quiet evenings, Lucas and Penelope still sat together on their porch, watching sunsets as magnificent as the one they'd shared on the day they acknowledged their love. His wooden leg rested comfortably beside her silk skirts, a physical reminder of the journey that had brought them together, a journey that had taught them both that true strength often lies hidden beneath apparent weakness, and that love, when genuine, sees beyond physical limitations to the essential character of the person within. "I never thought I'd find this kind of happiness," Penelope murmured one such evening as their grandchildren played in the yard where their children once had. "Nor I," Lucas admitted, his hair now silver, but his blue eyes as keen as ever. But then, the best parts of life are often the ones we never planned for. Like the wooden leg that had once seemed a curse but had ultimately led him to the right place at the right moment to save a woman who would change his life forever. And like the scandal that had driven Penelope west into the arms of a man who valued her courage more than her social standing. Their story of the one-legged cowboy and the Boston lady who saw beyond his limp to the strength within continued to inspire those who knew them. A testament to the enduring truth that real love doesn't see limitations, only possibilities, doesn't focus on what's missing but celebrates what remains, and recognizes that sometimes what appears to be a weakness can actually be the foundation of extraordinary strength.